I don't know why those words stuck with me. They weren't shouted or whispered dramatically, nothing you'd expect from a scene in a movie. She said them like she was tired, like she'd tried explaining the same thing 100 times before and finally gave up. But that was later. The first time I noticed her, it was nothing so cinematic. Just a Tuesday. The air in the bookstore smelled of paper and faint dust, the kind that clings to your sleeves. I was shelving returns, dragging a cart that squeaked every few feet when she walked in. She didn't belong to that hour. Most of our customers then were students, retirees, or the occasional parent killing time before school pickup. She stood out immediately, not because she was dressed to impress, she wasn't, but because she carried herself like she was too aware of the room. Her jacket hung loosely over one arm, hair pulled back in a way that revealed just enough of her face to notice the faint lines near her eyes. She scanned the shelves without urgency, her hand grazing the spines like she already knew none of them would give her what she wanted. I kept working, but my hand slowed. "Excuse me," she said finally, without looking up. Her voice was steady, low, not soft, but measured. "Do you have a copy of—" She paused, frowned at herself. "Never mind." I don't know why I answered. Most people shrug and move on, but something in the unfinished question made me curious. "You sure?" I asked, too quickly. "I can check the system." That earned me her eyes. Sharp, but not unkind. She studied me for a second longer than felt normal, then gave a small shake of her head. "No, it's fine." I nodded like I understood, but I didn't. She drifted further down the aisle. My cart stayed put, wheels crooked against the tile, as I pretended to straighten books just to watch her move. There was something deliberate about her silence. Not guarded exactly. More like she'd learned silence was safer than speaking. At one point, she reached for a novel on the top shelf. I stepped forward without thinking, muttering, "Here, let me." Her hand froze in midair. She turned slightly, and for the first time, I caught the hint of a smile tugging at her mouth. "I've been reaching for things longer than you've been alive," she said, not unkindly. It was a joke, but not really. I should have backed off, laughed it off. Instead, I lowered the book into her hands anyway. Our fingers brushed, barely, nothing intentional. But the moment stretched. She glanced at me, then down at the cover. "Thank you," she said, quieter this time. I didn't trust myself to reply. The shop's air felt heavier after that. Every shuffle of pages, every cough from another customer, landed too loud. She lingered for a while longer, carrying the book against her chest like it was something fragile. When she finally walked to the counter, she didn't look back. But as she paid, she said something almost to herself, though I caught it clear as glass. "You can't save me." I should have let it drift past. Just a stranger talking to herself. Instead, I heard my own voice, too low to stop. "Then let me fall with you." Her hand stilled over the receipt. A pause, then the faintest lift at the corner of her mouth. She left, and I stood frozen, pretending to rearrange paperbacks long after she was gone. And even now, hours later, I can still feel the weight of her glance, like a line I crossed without knowing where it might lead. I didn't expect to see her again. People drift in and out of the shop all the time, faces I forget before the register drawer closes. But 3 days later, she returned. Same jacket, sleeves pushed back this time, like she'd been rushing. Her hair was loose now, not tied, and it made her look younger for a moment, until the heaviness in her posture reminded me otherwise. She carried a stack of used books to the counter, placing them down carefully, like she didn't want the thud to announce her presence. "Selling?" I asked. She gave a single nod, trying to make space. I opened the covers, flipped to check condition, jotting notes on the sheet. Titles on grief, philosophy, one novel underlined in pencil so much it looked more like a journal than a story. I didn't say anything, but she caught me hesitating. "Go ahead," she said dryly. "Judge me." I shook my head. Not judging, just noticing. Her eyes softened briefly, then closed, as though even that tiny softness cost her something. While I keyed in prices, she leaned against the counter, rubbing her thumb across the ridge of her other palm. A nervous habit? Or maybe just fatigue? I wanted to ask if she was okay, but she didn't strike me as someone who'd answer honestly. The The silence stretched, so I filled it. You come here a lot? Not really. A pause. I used to. Her tone made me wonder what had changed. But I didn't push. Instead, I focused on her hands. The faint ink stain near her nail, the way her fingers tapped lightly when she was thinking. I wanted to remember these details, small as they were, because they felt more revealing than anything she said out loud. When I told her the total, she gave a short laugh. Unexpected, airy. That's it. Years of my life. And it's worth a coffee and a sandwich. The laugh caught me off guard. It wasn't bright, but it was real, unguarded. For a moment, she looked less like the woman who carried silence like armor, and more like someone just tired of carrying it. You should keep one, I said without thinking, nodding at the stack. So it doesn't feel like you gave it all away. She tilted her head at me, something unreadable flickering across her face. You're young, she said softly, not in a condescending way, but as if it explained why I'd said something so naive. And maybe it was naive. But she did pull one book back, the underlined one. She slipped it into her bag without comment. That small act felt like more than a transaction. It felt like a moment I wasn't supposed to see. When she left, she offered no goodbye, only a glance, quick, almost dismissive. But I carried it with me longer than I should have, because that glance lingered just enough to feel like an opening. And that was enough to keep me awake that night, wondering what she was holding back and why it mattered to me so much. It was raining the next time she stayed longer than a few minutes. Not the kind of rain people romanticize. This was relentless, soaking through jackets, hammering against the bookstore windows like it wanted in. Most customers had cleared out early. She didn't. She sat cross-legged in one of the corner chairs, her bag slouched on the floor, flipping absently through the same book for almost an hour. I should have been locking up, but I pretended to reorganize a shelf near her seat just to stay close. You're waiting it out? I asked finally, keeping my voice low so it didn't feel like I was intruding. She glanced up, half smiling. You don't lock the doors on time? Depends on who's still inside, I said, then immediately regretted how that sounded. Her expression shifted, amusement tempered with caution. She closed the book gently, setting it on the armrest. That's a dangerous habit. We sat in the thick quiet after that, rain filling every gap. She pulled her jacket tighter, and without thinking, I walked to the counter, poured the last of the lukewarm coffee from the staff pot, and brought it over. It's terrible, I warned, setting it beside her. She looked at the mug, then at me. Something in her eyes softened, almost reluctantly, before she wrapped her hands around the ceramic. Terrible is fine, she murmured. Her hands looked smaller like that, folded around something fragile. I wanted to ask what she was really doing here, why she kept coming back. But instead, I found myself saying, You always seem like you're about to leave, but you never do. Her lips pressed together, caught, but not offended. She let out a quiet breath. Leaving's harder than it looks. I didn't know what she meant, but I wanted to. The moment stretched, her gaze fixed on me, mine fixed on the way her fingers tapped absently against the mug, a rhythm too steady for someone as restless as she seemed. For one dizzy second, I thought she might tell me something. Her phone buzzed on the table. She stiffened instantly, the spell broken. One glance at the screen, and her jaw tightened. Without answering, she flipped it face down. I pretended not to notice, but it changed the air between us. You should go, she said suddenly, voice clipped. I live upstairs, I admitted before I could stop myself. No rush. That earned me a look I couldn't decipher, half warning, half something else. Her shoulders lowered a fraction, and she whispered, You don't know what you're doing. Maybe she was right. But I stayed anyway, perched on the edge of the shelf, pretending the storm was the only reason neither of us moved. The rain thinned, eventually. She set the empty mug down and stood, tugging her jacket close. For one reckless second, I almost reached for her sleeve. My hand lifted an inch before I caught myself. She noticed. I know she did. And yet she walked past me, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. Just enough contact to leave me staring at the empty doorway, wondering what might have happened if I hadn't stopped. She came back late, near closing again. No rain this time, just the dry chill of an evening where the streets already felt emptied out. I was alone behind the counter, flipping through invoices, when the bell above the door startled me. She walked in slowly, like she was testing whether she still belonged here. "You'll think I'm following you," she said, half-smile tugging at her mouth. I swallowed. I'd be lying if I said I minded. Her smile faded. She drifted toward the far corner, not touching the shelves this time, just standing there, arms folded. The quiet between us stretched too long. I closed the ledger and walked over, pulse hammering harder than I wanted her to see. "You don't usually come back this quick," I said. She tilted her head, eyes tired, voice low. "And you noticed that?" I didn't answer, but she knew. For a moment, neither of us moved. I leaned against the opposite shelf, the space between us narrower than it should have been. She met my gaze longer than usual, and it felt like standing on the edge of something I didn't have the language for. Finally, she broke it. "What are we doing?" The question was quiet, almost flat, but it landed heavy. I opened my mouth, closed it again. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I can't seem to stop." Her laugh was brittle, short. "You're young. You think every silence means something. Sometimes it's just silence." But she didn't look away. She stared at me like she was daring me to disagree. "Then why are you here?" I asked softly. Her arms tightened around herself, and for once, she didn't have an answer ready. Her lips parted, then closed. She exhaled hard, like the words she almost said burned too much to release. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed, thick with all the things we hadn't admitted. Her eyes glistened, and for a second, I thought she might step closer. Instead, she turned slightly, hiding her face in shadow. "You remind me," she whispered, "of something I don't get to have anymore." The honesty hit me harder than if she'd touched me. I wanted to close the distance, to reach for her hand, to say something that might anchor her to this moment. But my throat locked. All I managed was, "That doesn't mean you can't." She cut me off with a look. Not angry, not cold. Just devastating. "Don't offer me something you'll regret giving." And with that, she stepped back, leaving the space between us colder than before. I stood there, too still, listening to her footsteps fade until the bell over the door chimed again. Her words echoed in the empty shop long after she left, raw, unshakable, and heavier than any silence could ever be. The store was quiet that night, too quiet. Even the hum of the ceiling lights seemed louder than usual. She came in carrying nothing, no books, no bag, just herself. And I knew immediately something was different. She didn't drift toward the shelves this time. She walked straight to the counter, fingers drumming once against the wood before going still. "I shouldn't be here," she said. No greeting, no small talk. My throat tightened. "Then why are you?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, quick, almost defensive. But then she sighed, pulling something from her pocket. A photo, creased, edges worn from being handled too often. She laid it flat on the counter between us. A man, mid-30s maybe, smiling, arms slung around her shoulder. She looked younger in the picture, bright-eyed, almost careless with happiness. The sight of it jolted me in a way I couldn't name. "He died 3 years ago," she said simply. I blinked, caught between wanting to apologize and not knowing if she wanted that. "You remind me of him." Her voice didn't crack, but it was thin, stretched. "Not the way you look. The way you wait. The way you watch." The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a truth I had no right to touch. I forced myself to ask, "And that's why you keep coming back?" She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. Or maybe that's why I shouldn't. I stared at the photo. The man's grin, her softer face beside him. I wanted to hate him for existing, for being the reason her chest carried this weight. But instead, all I felt was small, like I'd stumbled into a story that wasn't mine to enter. "You don't have to tell me this," I said carefully. She shook her head. "No, you deserve to know what you're stepping into." Her words slowed on that last part, like even saying it aloud was dangerous. I didn't move. I just watched her fingers, how they rested on the photo a moment longer, how they lingered there as if letting go would be another kind of loss. When she finally slid the picture back into her pocket, her hand trembled. "Do you see now?" she asked quietly. "Why silence feels safer?" I couldn't lie. "I see." But it doesn't change that my voice faltered. I couldn't finish the sentence. She looked at me for a long moment, eyes glistening, unreadable. Then she whispered the line that broke something open inside me. "You're the first person I've wanted to talk to in years." And before I could answer, she turned, leaving me with only the echo of her confession and the storm she'd set loose inside my chest. The next time she came in, there was no storm, no photo, no reason at all. Just her. I was stacking a shipment of new titles, trying to act busy, when she walked past the shelves and into the back corner where the light was softer. No words, no greeting, just a glance that told me to follow. So I did. She sat, folding her hands in her lap. I stayed standing for a moment, nervous energy twitching in my fingers, before lowering myself into the chair across from her. The silence between us wasn't sharp this time. It was steady, like the kind that fills the air when two people finally stop pretending. "You shouldn't wait for me," she said quietly. "I'm not waiting," I answered. "I'm just here." Her laugh was soft, pained. "That's worse." We let that hang. She leaned back, eyes closed for a moment, and I realized how tired she looked. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind that lives in your bones. And yet, there was relief in her stillness, like sitting here with me wasn't another weight, but the absence of one. "I don't know what this is," she admitted finally. "I don't know what it could be, but I know I keep coming back." My chest tightened. "Then let's not call it anything." "Not yet." Her eyes opened, searching mine. Long enough that I felt stripped of every excuse I tried to build. Long enough that I saw her walls give, just slightly. She reached for the book resting on the table between us, one she hadn't even opened. Her fingers brushed mine as she picked it up. The touch wasn't deliberate. It lingered anyway. Neither of us moved. Her hand stilled against mine, faintly trembling. I turned my palm just enough for our fingers to meet properly, not holding, not claiming, just existing together in the space neither of us had dared before. She didn't pull away. For a long while, we sat like that. No declarations, no promises, just a shared breath, her thumb grazing against my knuckle once, like she was memorizing something fragile. Finally, she whispered, "It feels like falling." I wanted to tell her I'd already fallen, that I'd been falling since the first time she refused my help reaching that book. But I didn't. I only leaned forward slightly, close enough that my forehead brushed hers. We stayed there, eyes closed, suspended in a silence that wasn't empty anymore. When she finally stood to leave, she didn't say goodbye. She only squeezed my hand once, barely there, and walked out with the quietest kind of finality. And I knew, with a certainty that shook me, that nothing about my life could ever go back to before her. I think about that night more often than I should. Not the words, we hardly said any. Not the way our hands brushed, though I can still feel the tremor in her fingers. What I remember most is the silence. The kind that wasn't empty anymore. The kind that held something fragile but alive. People expect love to announce itself, to arrive with thunder and lightning, with declarations and grand gestures. But it didn't come that way for us. It came like a draft through a cracked window, subtle, almost invisible, but changing the temperature of the entire room. She still comes to the shop. Not every day, not in ways anyone else would notice. Sometimes she buys a book. Sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes she just sits in the corner, pretending to read while I pretend not to watch. And sometimes, when the quiet stretches long enough, we let our hands find each other on the armrest, like a secret no one else gets to see. I don't know what this will turn into. I don't think she does either. But something shifted in me. Before her, I thought love was about pursuit, about catching someone and making them stay. With her, I've learned it's more about presence, about being the space where someone can breathe again, even if they don't always let the air out in words. She once told me I reminded her of someone she lost. That used to scare me, made me feel like a shadow of another man's life. But now, I don't think it's about replacing anyone. It's about reminding her that parts of herself, the parts she thought were buried, are still alive. And maybe, just maybe, she's reminding me of something too, that I don't have to wait for perfect timing or perfect people to feel something real. We don't need to name this. We don't need to promise forever. What we have is enough. The silence, The small gestures, the quiet collapse into something neither of us asked for, but both of us needed. And sometimes, when I close the shop and the world feels too heavy, I hear her words again. You can't save me. Maybe I can't, but I don't need to. Because it was never about saving. It was about staying. And I did.